Welcome to Breaking Bio, where we'll be breaking down the general ideas of biology. On today's episode of Breaking Bio, we'll be talking about selection. Not only natural selection, but also artificial selection. What if I told you that selection is what caused me and you to be formed the way we are? What if I told you that it caused this tree to be formed the way it is? What if I told you selection is what caused every organism on this planet to be exactly the way they are? Well, it's the truth. Selection causes this, and it causes much more. But before we can start talking about selection, we have to talk about where it originated from, and that would be Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was a naturalist and author who, when was 22, left England on the HMS Beagle to visit the Galapagos Islands, South America, Africa, and Australia. By the early 1840s, Darwin had worked out his theory of natural selection, or descent with modification, as the mechanism for how populations evolve. But in evolution, we'll get to that on another episode. First up, we're going to be talking about natural selection within plants. We'll bring our plant expert, Katrina Lin, to talk about it. Good afternoon, Katrina. Do you think you could tell us a little bit about what you do?
I'm a botanist and I study the field of plants.
And do you think you could explain to us how natural selection and artificial selection plays into the roles of plants?
Of course. These thorns are a great example of natural selection.
And why is that?
They help defend the plants from other organisms that try to prey on them.
Do you know how the thorns originated?
A long time ago, there was a mutation in the DNA that caused these thorns to exist or develop. And over time, since these plants survive better or have a better fitness, they were able to pass the genes of the thorns to other plants.
Can you tell us how these display a good example of artificial selection?
These flowers are a great example of artificial selection because people chose them for their color. They could have, the slight pink in the flowers could be crossbreeding from red flowers and white flowers.
So we learned how natural selection can cause these thorns to develop in order to increase their chances of survival. And we also learned how through human hands we can change the looks of nature based on our preferences so we can have them a specific way of how we want them. But how does natural and artificial selection play a role in the lives of animals? Today we have Omar Martinez to answer these questions. Good afternoon, Omar. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
I'm a cynologist.
And can you explain to us what that is?
A cynologist is a person who studies related matters to canines and dogs.
And can you explain to us how artificial selection plays a role into dogs?
Alright, so artificial selection basically ties into humans modifying an organism to their choosing. So basically, the ancestors of this dog were wolves. So dogs before didn't really exist. So humans modified them to acquire the traits they desired. So
just like this dog, they wanted a more smaller and calmer dog than wolves.
Exactly. So they were interbred until they got traits they desired, and from there they kept going.
Mark, since you're so fond about natural selection and artificial selection, can you explain to us how this roly-poly here developed its features due to natural selection?
Alright. So basically, natural selection favors those organisms which have a greater fitness. That basically means organisms that are able to survive and reproduce viable offsprings. So with this roly-poly, you can see the features that it might have acquired were exoskeleton, which protected it from other predators. So natural selection favored that trait from other organisms that didn't have that. Besides that, you can also see roly-polies tend to curl into a ball. That's a very great defense mechanisms for roly-polies that fends them off predators. So that is another way that natural selection occurred to help this organism become what it is today. The weather's really coming on tonight.
Yeah, it is. Well, thank you for your time, Omar. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on your show.
No problem. And so, together we learned what natural selection and artificial selection can do to organisms. And with that, the first episode of our series is over. Hopefully you can tune in into our next episode of Breaking Bio. Okay. Alright, delete it. Stop. Alright. No, who do you think you are?
I'm not touching you. Do you see me touching you?
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
We're breaking up.
Oh, she's coming. That's how these
You
plants.
said I was gonna start. These thorns are a great example of natural selection. You know, why the laughing?